en donde vive el hombre, es la tierra. Sobre la tierra hay una bóveda celeste.
Humankind has always searched for an explanation of the phenomena of nature and the cosmos, says the excavator, Professor Roberto Gallegos. And here they turned the earthly city into a mirror image of the heavenly order. So Teotihuacan was the first true urban civilization in Central America. And if we compare its origins with those of the first cities in ancient Iraq or India, or even better in Shang Dynasty China, then a common picture begins to emerge, at the heart of which is the idea of the city as an earthly pattern of the cosmic order. You can see it here with these great ceremonial axes intersecting in the four directions, aligned to the surrounding mountains and to the constellations, with the subterranean world represented by that primordial cave deep beneath our feet, under the very center of the pyramid, whose innermost recesses were illuminated by the sun every summer solstice. It's a ritual theater where humankind maintains the order of the universe. And here in Central America, cities retained that function, even though they might become centers of commerce and trade and so on. Ideology then became one of the driving forces in the development of civilization. Religious, social, political, call it what you will, they're intermingled at that time. And ideology is also the key to understanding that fateful change which came over humanity with the beginning of civilization, by which the few came to dominate the many, as is still the case across much of the world today. The impetus of civilization now spread across Central America, from the Valley of Mexico to the rainforests of Guatemala and the Maya. At the time of Europe's Dark Age, splendid city-states arose here. The most intriguing is Copan in Honduras. Copan was ruled by a talented dynasty from the 5th to the 9th century AD. Its public plazas, pyramids and ball courts, features shared by all Mayan cities, were here adorned with wonderful sculpture. Here, the Mayan artists demonstrated a prolific imagination and a creative freedom which at times approaches a Western naturalism. The recent decipherment of Mayan writing enables us to do now what would have been impossible only a few years ago. Enter into the lives and even the feelings of the rulers commemorated here. Especially extraordinary is a series of portraits of a king we know by his hieroglyph sign as 18 Rabbit. Here's the fierce countenance of a man in his prime, his mid-40s, dated 11th of October, 721. Is it just our imagination, or is this not a softer expression, mellowed with age and experience? Late in July 736, this crude portrait, strangely sardonic, perturbed even. 2 years after this image was dedicated, 18 Rabbit was captured by a rival king and beheaded on the 3rd of May 738. He would have been in his early 60s. Writing was invented here independently as it had been in the Old World. Yet another clue to the common patterns in human development. And the greatest monument to Mayan literacy is the hieroglyphic stairway of Copan. It was literally a hill of signs, a huge stepped ramp 50 feet wide, 108 feet high, with well over 1,200 glyphs telling the mythic and dynastic chronology of Copan down to 755 AD, when it was dedicated by King Smoke Shell. It's the longest single written inscription in pre-Columbian America, a monument to writing and to time. The last known king of Copan, Yashpak, died in the winter of 820. The carving of the last date here was left unfinished on the 10th of February, 822. With that, the dynasty vanished and the city returned to jungle. A few peasants continued to farm here, but the land never again supported a city. Around the same time, Tikal too was deserted. Soon all the classic Mayan cities had gone. The Mayan collapse is still a great mystery. The land may have become exhausted, the environment destroyed. Perhaps the civilization simply lost its nerve. But the legacy carried on in the hearts and minds of the common people. And when the Europeans first stumbled on these ruins in 1848, the Indians living in the forest could still give their ancient name. Tikal. The place where the count of days was kept. Where the ancestors had borne the burden of time. With the collapse of the classic Maya, the focus of Central American civilization shifts back to its old heartland, the Valley of Mexico. Here, ringed by mountains, was a wide plain and a great lake with islands and fertile shores. Today it's all covered by Mexico City. Here in the 14th century, a warlike tribe settled, who called themselves Mexica. The city they founded here, Tenochtitlan, was the precursor of the largest city on earth. Beneath today's streets, in the crypt of the cathedral itself, we can still tap the power of the culture which rose here in the 15th century. In one of the most dramatic episodes in human history, the Aztecs. The art of the Aztecs still holds a fearful fascination. An art of tremendous spirituality, but a spirituality of a kind unlike anything we recognize from our own civilization. This statue of the earth goddess Coatlicue, found here in 1790, was hastily reburied, fearing it might be seen by the youth of Mexico, fearing they might be exposed to its still, dark and potent magic. The present center of Mexico City, around the cathedral, was also the ritual center of the Aztec city. Excavation here since the 70s has uncovered the foundations of the Great Pyramid of the Aztec war god. This is where the Spanish under Cortés, when they sacked the city in 1521, saw horrific scenes of human sacrifice. The Aztecs believed that the gods needed blood and the hearts of human victims to nourish them in the struggle with the forces of darkness. Without them, the sun would cease to rise, and by the time of the Spanish conquest, thousands could die on this spot in a single ceremony. All round the site, the archaeologists found grim evidence of their devotions. These are stone representations of the skull racks on which the victims' heads were mounted. This is one of those places on Earth whose terrible associations still seem to linger. How was it then that a civilization of such brilliance in the arts, in sculpture, textiles and poetry could have been so committed to mass bloodletting and human sacrifice? So that in a 4-day festival, 10,000 people could be dragged up the steps of the great temple here to have their hearts ripped out till the place was swimming in blood and reeking to the heavens. When the Spanish saw scenes like this, they thought that it must be literally the work of the devil. It was so wholly other. And yet, the Aztecs were only unique in the scale of their killing, for every human civilization has used sacrifice, especially in relation to religion. The theologian and the executioner have been intimates throughout history. The problem of the Aztecs then is a problem for all of us. To speculate, it would seem that the idea of the shedding of blood being necessary for the continuing of life became deeply rooted in our psyche during the thousands of generations we spent as hunter-gatherers in prehistory. So deeply rooted that bloodshed as a symbol is still the most powerful symbol of sacrifice today and can still erupt with atavistic power and violence. The scenes of frenzied killing which Cortés and his followers saw here, with their captured friends being dragged up the steps to their death, were, in a sense, proof of the Aztecs' piety, as Las Casas rightly saw. For uniquely among the great civilizations of the world, they raised solidarity with the universe above everything, including human life. In that, they couldn't be more different from the humanistic values of the great old world civilizations. To us, it may appear irrational, murderous in its brutality, and yet it is a mirror held up to our humanity, which we ignore at our cost. By a 52-to-1 chance, Cortés had arrived in the Aztec year 1 Reed, when their ancient prophecies said the god Quetzalcoatl would return from exile in the east. For the Aztecs, the coincidence drained away